Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it, so listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Danni experiences an ideal birth. She highlights to us what she thinks led to this outcome. We always acknowledge we can't control birth, but there are many things that can influence it. Danni helps us to understand those factors. Listen closely for those key ingredients which all came together to support Danni to discover what she had inside of her. She also experienced the incredible skill from her midwife, who was able to read her beautifully and came in just when she needed her most. Well worth a listen.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Transform Your Birth podcast. With me today is lovely Danni. Hello Danni, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk about my birth.
Yeah, well, she's got little Savannah who's 11 months old. And so we always start, Danni, looking at how you were feeling in pregnancy, because I always think, birth is a bit of a journey and every woman has to walk her path. And we often come into the space of being pregnant with a whole lot of thoughts and feelings and potentially fears and other people's stories. What was it like for you when you were pregnant?
So there's a lot of emotions. I think grateful was definitely one of them because we had a few issues, nothing huge. I don't like saying anything like infertility or anything because I don't think it was at that point yet, but we needed a little bit of assistance. So I think initially I just couldn't, I think I was in a bit of shock. And at the beginning of my pregnancy, there was a lot of unknowns. They thought that Savannah was actually an ectopic pregnancy, and then they thought I was miscarrying her, and it was very scary. So maybe I'll backtrack a bit. So when we wanted to fall pregnant, I guess people teach you when you fall pregnant about falling pregnant is that, like as soon as you do the deed, you'll fall pregnant and then that's it. And protect yourself at all costs, right? Where I think which isn't the reality for 99.9% of the population, that it doesn't just happen so quickly. So we had a few issues and I needed to go on medication to fall pregnant and work with a fertility clinic. So when we fell pregnant, we couldn't believe it happened because it happened our first cycle being on medication, which we were told wasn't going to be the case, or most likely wouldn't be the case. It would probably take about 3 cycles, and then after that we may have to look at other things. So we just couldn't believe it, and we had to go and get ultrasounds and things like that in another state because we were with my partner's family over Easter, and it was like I got a call from my fertility clinic basically saying your body is taking to the medication quicker than what we thought. We need you to get a scan and a blood test right now. And we were like, we're not in Canberra and it's Easter long weekend. And they were like, well, good luck. Go find a blood test facility, go find a pathology, find someone who can do your ultrasounds. Obviously they were a lot kinder than that, but that's how I heard it in my brain. And we were running around Queensland trying to find somewhere to give us a blood test. And so I think everything just didn't seem like it was in our favor for that cycle. So when we did fall pregnant, we were both a bit shocked. And obviously when you fall pregnant doing fertility treatments, it's kind of very medicalized, and you get a blood test and you get a call to say that you're pregnant, and it's not like that exciting moment that you see on TV, I guess, or that some people talk about where you pee on a stick and you hold it up and you're with your partner and you have this magical, oh, I'm so surprised moment. So Ours was very much like I went and had a blood test, waited for a particular time to get the call, and then they just tell you over the phone your HCG is at this point, which means you're pregnant. So it's all very medicalized, and I think that kind of made it all very quite shocking for the first, I guess, first trimester of my pregnancy. And luckily I took something into my control during my pregnancy, which felt like the whole first, like falling pregnant. I'm very grateful for the interventions, but it was very medicalized. I kind of didn't tell Drew when I got the phone. Drew's my partner. I didn't tell Drew when I first got the phone call to say that I was pregnant. I pretended the pathology were running over like behind on that day, and I said we didn't get our results, and then I was able to announce to him the way that I wanted to, so that was really nice. Yeah, but then I guess when you do fertility treatments, you kind of know too much information. So I was getting my bloods done almost every few days. They were monitoring how my HCG was rising, and it wasn't really rising how they were expecting it to rise or how they wanted to. So they told me that, you know, keep monitoring it, but made me research ectopic pregnancies. And it was all very scary at that point because you get this news that you're pregnant and it's so exciting. And then all of a sudden, a few days later, the feeling is completely different and you're panicking and you kind of like, your feeling before, which was like, oh, this is too good to be true. I wasn't expecting this to happen so quickly, kind of turns into like, oh, well, I knew it. Like, this isn't actually going to turn out to be like, this pregnancy isn't going to result in a baby. Or it, you know, it's a bit sad in that respect. So we were really scared it was going to be ectopic, and we were going in to get tests. And every time I was getting a blood test, my nurse would call me and say, you know, unfortunately, it's still like it's rising, but it's not rising high enough. And I was panicking. I was trying to log on to my old, you know, uni logons, trying to get onto like a database to research pregnancy and HCG. So it was very actually anxiety inducing until we heard the heartbeat, which was amazing. Well, initially, sorry, we saw that there was a baby and it was located in my uterus, thank God. And then after that, they were like, oh, it is in your uterus. However, it's your HCG still isn't rising how we would like. So, you know, it could result in a miscarriage, but fingers crossed it doesn't. So then you kind of get stressed all over again. And my fertility clinic were amazing. And I'm kind of just saying it like, you know, factual. They were very kind and very understanding and, you know, very informative. But when you're pregnant, you're stressed, all you hear is just like, negative, and
you're living on tenterhooks, aren't you, Danni? Like you know, it's almost like you're expecting the worst, and that's really hard. At what point in your pregnancy were you able to relax more into it?
So yeah, we heard the heartbeat, and I think after that, regardless of anything else, I was like, you know, like obviously my HCG rising the way that it did is normal for me because I was able to produce a heartbeat out of that. And then I think we did the NIPS test and that came back positive, like as in good, negative for everything. And then I think after that I was a bit more relaxed. And I was able, and I wasn't as sick, I guess, which was really nice. After this first trimester, I was able, I knew the baby was okay and I felt a lot better about it. And I had my energy back. So then after that, I was just able to enjoy it. And, you know, you're able to tell people then at that point. So then that was really exciting because you get to involve everyone else in your exciting news. And I'd always wanted to be pregnant and I always like envisioned how pregnancy would be. So I was, you know, just trying to take all of it in and be grateful for it. And do as much research as I could. So I was just living and breathing podcasts. I was looking up courses like yours. Yeah, I was just, trying to really just take it all in for what it was. And and just be grateful that this was how it was going and grateful that, you know, yes, the beginning was a bit scary and caused me a bit of anxiety, a lot of anxiety. You know, it couldn't be any better now. And like, you know, my body knows what it's doing pretty much. Because I think up until, you know, that 13, 14 week mark, my body's had trouble falling pregnant. My body had like, I thought was having trouble, like, you know, creating the baby and, you know, helping the baby grow. So I think after that point, I was like, no, my body knows what it's doing and I need to just trust that I know what it's doing and just let it do its thing.
Beautiful. And then you came and did the Transform Your Birth course. How did that help you?
It was awesome. Like it was more than what I thought it was going to be. And I thought it was just going to be really focused around us as the females. But I love, and I tell everyone that one of the best parts of it, in my opinion, was how well you catered to the other partner in the room. I just thought, you've obviously been doing this a long time, because the way that you speak to, I guess, the mother or the person who's pregnant was very different to how you addressed majority of the time the males in the room. And you did such a good job of it. With us, you were very much like, oh, like, all this like spiritual lovey-dovey, like wonderful stuff. And then you were like, okay, boys, get out a pen and paper. This is your list. This is your do's and your don'ts. And you can just see them all scrambling, being like, oh, but that was like very much how they kind of took it in. And my partner, Drew, I know I'm probably getting a bit ahead of myself, but when I was in labor and everything, he was very much, you could tell in his mind, he had like his checklist of do's and don'ts, and he was doing them like to the T, which was pretty funny. So that was probably one of the biggest things we took out of it, is my partner came away and was just like, I feel really prepared. And I felt really reassured that not only was I prepared, but I felt like that he was prepared and felt like that he knew what to do.
Yeah, that's lovely you say that. And thank you for, it's a lovely compliment. I get to see people on the other side of birth. So I get to see the impact of what the teachings have. And of course, we've now been doing this podcast over a year, so I get to hear it again in this context. But time and time again, the thing that I hear back over and over again is the breathing was amazing and my partner was amazing. And to me, when you get partners on board and they understand the process and they learn how important their role is, that takes a lot of pressure off the birthing mum. And not only that, it brings them squarely into the labour room as both of you having a very clear role, walking through that doorway into parenting, side by side, feeling like and this is the big difference, feeling like partners have contributed to that situation. And that has a flow-on effect. It has a flow-on effect into parenting as well, because they haven't just been sitting in the corner freaking out or feeling very much on the outer and sidelined, because that too can find its way into parenting because of the feeding journey that women then have to go on once they've had their babies. So it is important we get partners on board, because partners, are the key to her oxytocin release, because nobody in that room loves that woman more than they do. And they're also the key to helping her to feel safe, loved and supported. And to find comfort. That's wonderful. So tell us about the day. How did it unfold?
So I went into labor 3 days before my due date, which I was so grateful for. I was really worried I was going to go overdue, and then the scary thought of induction comes up. So I was really grateful that I went just before my due date. And I think I started feeling, because I never really thought I had Braxton Hicks. Like, I don't recall ever feeling like that I had any sort of contractions until the actual time. So I didn't really know what I was looking for. But I hadn't had cramping until since the very beginning of my pregnancy. So in the afternoon, the day before she was born, I think around 4 o'clock, I started to get period pain. And I remember being like, because as most people who are pregnant know, like right at those end stages, you're just like so hyper aware of any sort of new feeling that comes into your body. So as soon as that started happening, I was like, oh, but then I thought, oh, maybe it's not. But for the first time ever, I actually was like, I think I'm going to get my contraction timer out just to kind of see if there's a pattern. So yeah, I started timing them, and it seemed like every 30 minutes, obviously it was super early stages, not really, I wouldn't call it labor, but super early stages, I started noticing that every 30 minutes I was getting sort of just light period pain. And I thought, this could be something. So I didn't tell Drew at that point, because I didn't want him to think that I was just a crazy person. So I I just timed them myself. And then about 8:30 at night, I went to the toilet and I got blood, and I hadn't bled my whole pregnancy either. So I was like a little bit, but I was like, that's a sign that something's happening. So I messaged my midwife. So I was doing I was going through the continuity of care program. Right. So I messaged my midwife and I was like, I think something's happening. And she was like, yeah, I think so. She goes, I was meant to have an appointment to see her the next day. So she was like, if I don't see you before then, I'll see you tomorrow. Try ignore it for as long as you can. and let me know how you go overnight. And then I went out to Drew, and that's when I told him. I was like, okay, like stand by, like things are happening. And it's funny because you think that like you're so prepared, and obviously he did the course, so like we both know that it can take a really long time for anything to ramp up or for anything to like seem like it's go time. But
Yeah.
I think it's natural for men to just jump up and go, oh, like where's the bags? And you know, he didn't really do it like that, but he was kind of like, okay, well, like let's get everything at the front door. And I was like, no, like this isn't going to happen tonight. Like relax. And he was like, no, I just want to be prepared. So we had to make sure that our bags were just like at the front door so he could relax. And then I just was like, okay, well, I'm just going to try and ignore it for as long as I can. And he went to go sleep in our spare bedroom because I think obviously from your course as well, he knew that he needs to be on his A game. And I found that lying down made my contractions a lot worse. So I was like, oh, I'm probably going to keep you up. So he went and slept in the spare bedroom and just said to me, like, come and get me.
Yeah.
And it starts to ramp up. And I was like, yeah, no worries. And I think by midnight, I think you're also really excited. You don't want to fall asleep. But also like every however many minutes it was taking for each contraction to come at that point, I was a bit like, oh, like I kept waking up to them and lying down, started to feel really uncomfortable. So I think about 3 a.m. I messaged him. I not messaged him, I went into his room and I was like, I think I need you now. Like I think it's getting, I can't ignore them anymore. And he woke up and he made me some food. And then my contractions got to about 3 minutes apart. But then they didn't do anything else. And they didn't come closer to each other. So we didn't really know what was going on there. And in my head, I thought, oh, it's getting so close. Like I'll probably have the baby by the morning, which wasn't the case. So we tried to rest a little bit more. And then about 6 a.m., I tried to get in our shower. And in my head, I always wanted to stay at home the whole pregnancy, the whole labor.
Yeah.
Until like the very end. But it's funny because as soon as I got in the shower, which is where I thought I'd be laboring majority of the time, it just didn't feel right. I didn't feel right being at home. I didn't feel right like in the shower. I couldn't get comfortable. Like there was no railing to hold on to. Like it didn't feel right. And I was like, I think regardless of where I am along, I think I really want to get into the birth center. And maybe it may have been different if I didn't know I was going into a birth center, which is like you have the bed and the bath and the shower and everything. Maybe it would have been different if I thought I was going to an actual hospital room.
Yeah.
But I called my midwife. I was meant to have my appointment at 9 a.m., but I think I called her at 7 a.m. And I think she thought, oh, like I don't like it's you're probably not in like full-blown labor or anything. But she heard me go through a contraction and she was like, oh yeah, like maybe if you want to, like definitely, like I think you're at a stage where you can come in. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. And in my head, I think I thought, oh, I'm going to come in. The baby will be here before lunchtime. Like these are getting hard, you know? But that definitely wasn't the case. So yeah, we went in and we went to the birth center and we got in and I didn't want to lie down or sit down. I felt like the best position for me. And like you said, like you'll know what the best position is for you. And I'm just so grateful I was able to move around. I just wanted to be standing and leaning over the bed, like putting all my weight into my hands. So after the birth, like my wrists were so sore because like, and the base of my feet, like I tell my friend who's about to give birth, I'm like, bring sneakers, like, because if you want to stand, like your feet get so sore. So I was basically laboring over the bed for ages. And my contractions got really close, but then they didn't get any closer for a really long time. And we were a bit worried about that. And I was getting a bit nervous because I was like, oh, like, what if this is one of those times where, you know, I'm going to need an intervention or they're going to send me home. I felt like I was bothering people by being there. Like I didn't feel like I should be there just yet. But I knew that I wouldn't be able to go home. And I think just before lunchtime, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, it can be very difficult for women to believe that they're actually in proper labor.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean active labor. So we divide that first stage, which is the opening of the door to the uterus, into 2 phases: early labour, which is prior to 4 to 6 centimetres, and then active labour, which is 4 to 6 centimetres and on. And we keep it that way because in early labour, your labour can start and stop. And the only way to really know technically where you're up to is with a vaginal examination, but we try to avoid those if we can because they're very distracting and disrupting for a mother, and it puts her into a sense of time consciousness. So you can be in active labour and not necessarily believe that you're in it without being validated by a vaginal examination. And then that can sort of cause you to wonder, is this right? What's happening? And we get into this, where am I up to? Thinking. It sounds like your mind got a bit in the way there, Danni, of believing that you're in well-established labour. Does that feel right?
Yeah, it was weird. It was like part of me was like, oh yeah, this baby's going to come before lunchtime. And then the next part of me was like, oh, I'm bothering my midwife. Like, she's probably like, why is she even here? I think just before lunch, I started throwing up. And that's when I thought, oh, like it's go time.
Game
and
on.
No, looking back, it definitely was not game on. But I started throwing up. And then I think by about like just after lunchtime, because I think I started using the TENS machine when we got to the hospital, and that was the best thing ever. And by after lunchtime, I was just so exhausted. I hadn't slept the night before, and I'd been standing, and Mother Nature's so mean. Like, I was exhausted, but lying down made it the most painful. So I had to be on my feet. And I think at that point, from memory, I said, I started going, I can't do this. And that's when I started to get really like a bit emotional. And I said to my partner, I was like, I'm probably going to need the epidural. And he was like, no, he's like, I don't think you will. And I'm looking at him being like, I think I need it. And luckily I had the best midwife ever. And she pretty much just stayed in the corner until like in silence, until she kind of recognized that I needed a bit of oomph from her. Yeah. So she's like, she says to me, she goes, Danni, there's like so many other things that we haven't done yet that we would do before we would even consider doing an epidural. And I was like, okay. And then she was like, why don't we try getting in the shower? So I got in the shower, and in my head, my goal was just break my waters, because at this point my waters hadn't broken. So I was in the shower, and that was the best thing ever. Drew was on the front of my belly with water. I was like sitting on a chair with water on my back, and I found that was really, really helpful. And I should say, you'd be really proud of Drew. He was like constantly feeding me, giving me small sips of water, and reminding me to go to the toilet.
Oh, good on him.
I know, he had his little list in his head, which was really good, because I wouldn't have ever thought of anything like that. And it's so true. You don't, like, I was not hungry, I was not thirsty, but like I was laboring for over 24, like active labor, probably 24 hours. Yeah. So he was doing his job. I wouldn't have done anything like that. So yeah, and then after in the shower for a bit, I was really exhausted. I think this was like late afternoon, and I wanted to get in the bath, and my midwife was a bit hesitant. And now looking back, it's because she knew I probably wasn't ready to be, like, I think she wanted to hold off on the bath until I was like really close. And looking back now, I was handling the contractions quite well. Like, I had my music playing. I was just like, I was moaning, I was imagining, I think it was you said one of the things to imagine is like the wave, and like riding it to the top and then knowing it would come back down again. So that's what I was visualizing. And I think I was handling them well. I think I was just getting really tired. And obviously not knowing when it's going to like happen. Like, you just like, how long can I keep doing this for? And I hadn't had a check yet by that point. I don't think I had a check yet. And by that point, I think, I got in the bath, and I was super relaxed. I was lying on my tummy with my hands up on the step, and kind of just like let my hips float. And I started falling asleep, and my contractions started spreading out. And my midwife was like, we have to get you out. Like, this is the opposite of what we want. And I was like, oh, I don't want to get out, because it was so comfortable and relaxing. And I think at that point, I was like, I think I want to check. Maybe it was before then, because I had 2 checks. I asked for the first one, and my midwife confirmed. She's like, are you sure you want to be checked? And I was like, yeah, I think I do. And I think I was at 6 centimeters. And in my head, I was like, that's good. That's great. Like, good. Great. 6 centimeters. And in the back of my head, I kept thinking, just because it took this long to get to 6 centimeters, it doesn't mean it's going to take another, like, however long to get to.
Exactly.
I was really happy with that. But in my head, I was like, after that check, I was like, right, like, my aim is to break my waters, because at this point my contractions were like stable, but they weren't getting closer together. And I think I was being irrational, and I thought that they were just going to send me home. But I was at a stage where I don't think they would have sent me home. But in my head, I was like, they're going to think I'm faking it or something. Like, I'm not actually a diaper. So I then was like, okay, and I was a dancer. So in my head, after I got checked, I was like trying to do all these like lunges and like stretching my legs up. I was trying to get in all these weird positions to try and like thinking it was like a bubble to pop inside me. I was like, we need to pop this bubble. Trying to like labor with like one leg hiked up on a chair, which was like not good. So I kind of just like spent my time going between the TENS machine and the shower. I didn't get back in the bath until later on, and they were helping a lot. And then I think it got to like close to 6 p.m. and I was so exhausted. I was like crying and I was like saying to Drew, I was like, I think I need a C-section. Like, I think you need to go organize a C-section. Like, I can't do this. And my midwife was like, why? Well, and I said to her, I was like, can you just break my waters? And she said to me, she said, um, Danni, that's considered an intervention and you didn't want an intervention. She goes, are you sure that's what you would want? Like, let's think about this for a bit. And I remember being so frazzled and so exhausted. And luckily Drew knew what interventions and breaking waters and all that meant, because I just looked at him and I was like, why don't I want interventions again? Like, I just couldn't, like, I was think. Yeah. I couldn't think. And him and my midwife were talking. I was obviously involved, but luckily he knew what was going on and had learnt all that sort of stuff. And they came up with the plan that I was happy with, where that she'd check me again. And if I had progressed like more centimeters, she was just going to let me keep going as is. But if I hadn't progressed, she asked if I wanted her to break my waters, and I said yes. So she went in to check and she had all of her little utensils set up to break my waters if that was the case. And she went to put her hand in to check how many centimeters I dilated. And as she put her hand in, my waters broke all over her. She was like, she goes, I was going to break your waters, but like I didn't. So like, you probably, like, we can say that I didn't because I didn't have the utensil in there. It was just obviously just from the tiniest bit of pressure of her hands.
Yeah.
But she
Can
didn't
I
tell
come
me.
in there? That's just to explain to people about the breaking of the waters. Now, picture this: your baby's in a bag of waters, right? In the caul, the membranes surrounding the baby, and the uterus is shrinking. That's what's going on in labor. It's not only is it trying to open the door, but it's also shrinking. It's trying to push the baby out. It's contracting and what we call retracting. And ideally, we don't mess around with breaking waters unless we really feel like it's appropriate, primarily because if you break waters too early in a labor, and that baby then comes down quite suddenly because it hasn't shrunk enough to get the baby to move into that lovely tuck dive position. So we want babies when they're, going through the labour process, as the uterus gets smaller and the pressure gets greater, it causes them to really tuck in so that the part of the head that presents is the crown. And the crown is the best part to present because it molds really well and really easily. So if you break waters too early, it can predispose that head coming down, say forward first or a little bit to the side. Or I knew a woman who, when they broke her waters at the beginning of the labour, the baby's hand came in front and it became an obstructed labour. And this was her 5th child. And she'd had 4 completely straightforward births, but she needed to have a Caesar with the last because of breaking waters too early. So that's why good midwives prefer not to interfere with the process, to let that process of shrinking to, predispose that baby to being in that lovely tuck dive position. However, though, sometimes the membranes are very thick. And sometimes it's the membranes themselves that can be preventing a woman from progressing because the head isn't sort of acting like a wedge because they've got these very thick membranes between the head and the cervix. So I was once in a birth with a woman who wasn't progressing. They were talking about caesareans, and I reminded the doctor that her waters hadn't broken, that might be a good thing to do before we go to caesarean. And when they broke waters, everything started to progress from there. So there can be a reason to do it and there can be a reason not to, but you don't want to do it too early. That's pretty much the uptake of that. So when those waters break, what happened then in terms of how you experience the labour? Because it can really kick it into another gear, can't it?
Yeah. Like, looking back now, like, the contractions before the waters broke were like so manageable.
Yeah.
And so they broke and my midwife was like, oh, this is great. And she said, there's no meconium. So, because that was a concern as well. She goes, if I break your waters and there's meconium, we can't have you in the birth center. We'd have to move you back into the proper hospital, which I obviously didn't want because I was like, I want the bath. So that was great. And
happy baby.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really good. And I didn't have I wasn't hooked up to any machines during the labor, which I was really grateful for. But my midwife would always come over sporadically and like check the heartbeat, and it was always good. So I think just as a general theme of my labor as well, even though like there were times where I was like, I can't do this, or like I was panicking, I never felt like scared. I never felt like I was afraid for my life or my baby's life. I just felt like I just was experiencing like this intense experience, you know, and obviously I was like I was panicking in those moments, but I never felt like I was in danger, which I think is a really beautiful thing. And I think that's because of my midwife, because I've heard lots of stories where it's not like that, like women like get PTSD and awful things like that from feeling that. So yeah, so
Let me ask you another question though. Sorry to interrupt. You were saying you were panicking. Was that really what was going on, or you were being challenged about your ability to keep going? Was it a panic or?
Sorry, I'm about to get to the panic. So that was when I was in transition.
Okay.
That comes just after this. So the waters broke. And then I got up and the pressure was just like so intense. Like I thought the pressure was intense before. The pressure became so intense, and the contractions. And it's funny, like I wouldn't like, obviously it's like not a pleasant feeling, but at that point it just kind of felt like the best way to describe it is like the most intense UTI you've ever had. Like just that intense, like heavy, like you need to just release something and it's not releasing and it's so uncomfortable and it would just come. And I just couldn't believe it, took my breath away. Like I was like, this is so different to the contractions I had prior to my waters breaking. And I was like, I need to get back in the shower. And my midwife was like, no, no, no. Like I want you to do 4 more contractions on the TENS machine and then we'll go into the shower. And I was like, okay. And she didn't tell me what I had progressed to after my waters broke when she checked. And that in my head, I was like, oh, that means I haven't progressed at all. And I asked her that. I was like, I don't want to know if I've progressed or not, have I? And she goes, no, I don't want you to focus on that. Your waters are broken. That's progress in itself. Like just focus on that. Like everything's going good. And I was like, okay. And I tried to like switch my headspace. I was like, don't think about it. You know that like just even if it hasn't progressed, like it could progress straight away.
Very
quickly, which is what actually happened. So I got into the shower and that's when the panic, and now I look back, I was definitely in transition, came, because prior to this, the shower took away a lot of like the pain, I guess you could say, prior to my waters breaking. But because these now were so intense, they weren't helping at all. And that's when I started to panic, because I was like, if the shower isn't helping and I was relying on that, like how can I do this? And that's when and then I started to think in my head, even if I wanted an epidural, that it would take forever for them to come. Like there's no point. Like I just have to deal with this. And I remember looking at my partner and I just have this vivid memory of his face. And he is like you can't shake Drew. Like he is so cool, calm and collected. And I looked at his face and he just was like white, and he was holding the shower head just like like could not like, I was just acting irrational. I was like holding onto the poles in the shower, almost like climbing them, like squeezing them so tight. I could not believe how intense this was. And that's when my midwife kind of came and like came up to my face, like, because like I said, she was kind of off to the side, never really like intervening with Drew and I. But I think that's when she knew, she was like, okay, this is my moment, like I need to be involved now. And she like got me back in the zone, and she's like, no, like you can do this, like, you know, pumping me up. And I was just like, I don't know if I can, like freaking out a little bit. And she was like, no, you can. And obviously she knew this was transition, because I look back now, she disappeared for a second, and I think and knowing now, she was filling up the bath with more warm water. So I think she knew like it was go time. And I remember, and I just got this really intense, it's funny because Drew, I think, learned from your course that being on all fours is a great position to be in. So throughout my whole labor, he was encouraging me to get on all fours. And I was like, no, I don't want to be on all fours. Like it was like this contentious thing we had throughout my whole labor, where all of a sudden in the shower, I just looked at Drew. I was like, get me a mat. I need to be on all fours. And I think that tweaked in his brain. He was like, something like this is happening. So he was like, get the mats, like get a mat underneath you. And I just got on all fours. And I had, which I'm so happy with, because I've always wanted to experience this. I got that fetal ejection reflex where my body just started going, get the baby out. But in my head, I was like, but my midwife only checked me like half an hour ago or an hour ago, whatever it was, like very recently. And I obviously hadn't progressed from a 6. So I was like, oh my God, my cervix is going to rip. Like my body is confused. Like, I don't know, like it's not ready. But obviously like, that's why it was so intense after my waters broke. Cause obviously my cervix just stretch straight away.
Yeah.
So my body was like pushing, and I yelled out, I was like, I'm pushing, like I need to push. And I started like doing that guttural, like really deep, like roaring noise. And in the back of my head, from everything that I'd learned, I was like, oh my God, this is happening. Like this is happening. And I thought it was like the baby was going to pop right out there in the shower. So I was a bit worried that the baby would fall onto the floor. But it's just so funny how your body just kind of like it knew exactly what it was doing. You know what I mean? It's just, it's so amazing. But I looked over my shoulder to my midwife thinking like she had no idea what was going on. But like, obviously she was so all over it. I was like, I need the bath. And she's like, yeah, I know, it's all ready for you. And I was like, yes, you're the best. And I climb into the bath, and I've gotten that same position where I was on all fours and I had my arms up on the bath seat. And I heard that a really good position to be pushing in is on all fours, but turning your knees in. So like your hips open up that way.
Yeah.
So I just remember being focused on that. And my body just wanted to push. I remember every contraction, there was like 3 pushes. There was like my body pushed 3 times, and it was like 3 different types of pushes. It was almost like a little like practice push, then like the heavy duty, like the one where my body was just like throwing everything out. And then the third one was just like a little like right at the end. So each contraction, I like knew that there was like a push that I had to help with. And then the second one where it was like my body's just doing it all and I'm just kind of like pushing it over the top of it. And then the third one was kind of just like a little like extra to use up the whole contraction, if that makes sense. And I didn't consciously make that pattern. It was like that's how my body was doing it. And I was roaring like a lion. Like, I'm surprised all of Canberra didn't hear me. And I was pushing so low that my mouth started to go into the water. And Drew was like, lift your head up. Like, you're going to like breathe in the water. And I was like, but I was just like so in the zone. I don't even know what was going on. Apparently another midwife came into the room, because I think the protocol is when the person starts pushing, they need to bring another one in. So she was sitting across the other side, and in the middle of like this big deep roar, I made eye contact with her, and she's like on the other side of the room. And I remember thinking, where did you come from? I didn't notice you came in the room. But my midwife is down the other end, and she had the mirror looking, and she was so reassuring. She was like putting the Doppler on like while I was pushing, and she was like she didn't know Savannah's name then, but she goes, baby's heart rate is like hasn't changed. Like, she doesn't even realize she's being born, which made me so like I just didn't even think throughout the whole pushing like to be scared for my baby. Like, I just never was worried that she was not okay. And I could feel her moving. Like, I could feel every push I made was so efficient. Like, and I'm not efficient. Like, my body was just doing it. Like, I could just feel her moving. So I was like, this is fantastic. Sorry, are you all right? Forever. I don't
Matching yourself.
Yeah, sorry, my baby's not going to sleep. No, yeah, go get her. So yeah, I was doing these pushes, and I could feel her coming, and I think that's just what made me so motivated. Like, I just knew that this was working. And I think I started to feel that stretching feeling, and that was really intense. And Drew had done the perineum massages on me for like a month prior to this, but he never did up the top. It was just because we never thought of it. We just did down the bottom. So I started going, oh my gosh, I think I'm tearing. And my midwife was like, no, like your skin's very concertina down the bottom. There's heaps of room to stretch. And I was like, no, up the front. And she was like, oh, like, I think it's fine. And I'm tracking back a little bit when I first got in the bath and I started to push against like my body. My midwife came up to me and made eye contact with me, and she goes, Danni, like, I know you really want to push, but you need to listen to your body. When you feel that sting, like, hold back a bit. Like, that's your body telling you to like hold back.
To give
and I was like,
time to open.
Yeah. So I would, because I think when I got in, I was just like going, like throwing myself at it, where she was like, throw yourself at it until you feel that sting. And I think that's what, like, I was just so focused. Like, I was so exhausted, and obviously like there was so much going on, but that was probably the most focused I was the whole like labor process. I remember just closing my eyes and like, I don't know what I was visualizing, but I must have been visualizing something. And I was so in tune with those 3 separate pushes and like stopping when that sting would come. But obviously when the head was coming, that sting like stayed. So that's when I kind of like woke up a bit to it. And I said to that's when I said, I was like, oh, I think I'm tearing. I wasn't this calm. I was very like, I think I'm tearing. And she was like, Danni, like, no, you're not. And then I said, no, I think it's the front. And I remember she said something to me along the lines of like, don't worry about that. Like that's our job to worry about after you get the baby out. Like you're doing a great job. Just keep doing what you're doing. Like that isn't for you to worry about. And I remember I could feel the head half out, and she was like, do you want to touch the head? And I touched it, and it didn't, I think I was expecting to feel hair, but it was so slimy. And I remember just thinking, waiting for the next contraction, because between the contractions, I was very calm. Like I was breathing and I was like trying to just like not tense up down there. So in between them, I was very calm and quiet. But I remember between the contraction before the head came out, like the head was just sitting there. And I remember just mentally preparing myself. I was like, you're going to tear and it's going to be fine and they'll fix it and it's fine. It will just be a pain for a split second. Like you'll be fine. And then I pushed because I could not, like your body just pushes. And it was like the sharpest pain for like a split second. And then it was almost relief because obviously it stretched around the head and then went around her neck.
Yeah.
And once it was around her neck and I knew the head was out because my midwife was like, the head is out. And she was like, and I remember she goes, she's so pretty. And I was like, oh my God. And I nearly started celebrating then, like as if it was done. Because in my head, I knew like once the head was out, most of the time, that's like the hardest part done. So I was like, yes, I did it. Like thinking in my head, like, this is the best. I was pretty much like in my head celebrating that I just finished the birth, but obviously I still had to push the body out. So the next contraction came, I did a push and I felt majority of her come out and I thought it was all of her. So I tried to grab her, but my midwife was like, no, you need to do one little push. And I did like the smallest push, like the tiniest little, like compared to what I was doing, like this tiny, like, and then she came out. And it's so funny, as soon as she came out, like I remember like blow by blow when I was pushing, like exactly what was going on through my head. But as soon as she came out, like it's all just like so frazzled. Like as soon as she came out, I like put her up on my chest and like the pain instantly, or the like whatever like feeling it was, like it all just went away. And you're just like this, it's so true. You just get high on whatever hormone it is, like completely. And I think it's so funny because they say like if you do an unmedicated birth, like you won't be like all loopy after you give birth, where I feel like I was completely loopy. Like it's so true. Like it is such a natural high. Like yeah. I don't remember much of it. Like I was totally off this planet, like in another realm, in another dimension. Like I was just like, I can't remember really what was going on. Like Drew says, I thought that we were in the bath for only like a short period of time and then moved to the bed. But when I say that to Drew's like, no, like we were in the bath for like quite a long time, which for me, like it just doesn't, like it all felt like it was like blow, 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 like cutting the cord, doing everything all happened like in a split second. Because after the birth, I said to Drew, oh, I'm a little bit disappointed because Savannah's cord was very short, so only half her body was able to come out of the water. So she didn't cry when she first came out because I don't think she realized, she didn't have that big moment of like being pulled into the cold air. And like my midwife was like, let her be attached to the cord for quite a while. We delayed cord clamping, but in my head I thought we only delayed it by like 10 minutes, where Drew was like, no, it took quite a while for us to cut the cord. But in my head it all felt like it all happened very, very, very quickly.
Time just disappears.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought I didn't remember crying, but Drew said I was sobbing. Like it's so like it's such an out of body experience. And to be honest, like my biggest regret is not filming that part of the labor or like birth, because I just don't have any recollection. I remember seeing my midwife with Drew's phone taking photos, and I remember thinking I'm so grateful that she's doing that. But prior to that, like I'm not prior, but like besides that, like all I just remember is just like being with Savannah and just looking at her and like couldn't believe that she was here, and just couldn't believe that my body had just done that. And like my brain was like flicking through everything that just happened, and I was just like, that's exactly how I wanted my birth to go. Like I just can't believe that's like that she's here and we're both safe. And when my midwife told me that her cord was short, one of my biggest fears throughout my pregnancy was that I would give birth to her and the cord would be wrapped around her neck, or she'd come out and she wouldn't be breathing, or just something like that. And I remember when she said, oh, the cord's really short, like and that jogged my memory. And I was like, it's so funny, when I was pushing, I never thought for 1 second, like I didn't think about any of those fears. Like I wasn't scared. I was just so in tune with my body and so trusting of my body and trusting of my midwife that she was just made the whole experience so calm and beautiful, and like was so respectful to my wishes. It just was exactly how I wanted my birth to go. And I just couldn't believe, like, I couldn't believe it's done. And like, we're here and we're safe and she's breathing. And, you know, I thought I'd still torn at that point, but we find out later that it was just a little graze, like I hadn't torn, which was really surprising because like I thought it was happening. Um, so I just couldn't believe it. I was so grateful, so grateful that it was pretty much the most idealistic birth I could have ever wanted. Everything I'd heard on those birth podcasts and in like whenever when we were watching things that you'd show us or like telling us things, like everything that I clocked being like, that would be really good to have, or I hope that happens to me, all happened. And I just couldn't believe it. I think I was just so off the planet loopy and happy and shocked. And yeah, it was really amazing, to be honest.
Yeah, there's the joy of what's possible when women are able to do things under their own steam. You know, Mother Nature has a beautiful blueprint of potential inside of all of us. And when we're able to activate that and make full use of those performance enhancing hormones, and to, you know, the care and the skill of the care around you, you can never underestimate the power of that too, to create the space for you to discover, particularly when you got through those parts where you describe as being a bit panicked and a bit questioning of your ability to keep going, having people around you to support you through those moments of wobbliness and I call it the cracking of the shell. It's the cracking of the shell from the woman into the mother, where you want to get off the bus, but you can't. You got to push through.
That's exactly how it feels.
And yeah, exactly.
There's no other way. Like when just before the head came out and I thought I was going to tear, I remember just thinking, well, like there's no other option. Like this is just gonna happen. Like it's just gonna happen. Like mentally preparing, but yeah. So
you had a lot of sensitivity around what you were experiencing in second stage. Not all women experience it as clearly as what you did. You could really feel that stretching, but also with an awareness. I love the way you described that, those 3 stages in your pushing phase, where there was the grunty bit in the middle, but a couple of little parts either side of that pushing, which enabled you to do it in a way that didn't cause the body to have to tear to make space. When you get that urge to bear down, it's a very powerful urge, and it's very hard to resist that urge. But when you've got the right coaching with, you know, beautiful midwives who she just tuned you into it, you know, feel that stinging, just back off a little bit. She was obviously trying to get you through without any need for tearing, and that's just such a wonderful outcome, such skills.
Yeah, she was amazing. And that's the thing, like I think that whole contraction, you just want to push the whole time. I think that's maybe why it came in bursts, because when I pulled back, my body was just like, it's like when you put like your foot down on the accelerator and it's like holding back, and then you let go and it like goes full pelt again. But that was really good, because I think if it wasn't for her, I probably just would have gone full pelt the whole contraction, and I reckon I probably may have torn, because I think like I only pushed, my midwife said, for about 40 minutes. So I think the pushing was like quite quick and quite efficient. So I reckon that if I went full pelt, she would have just come down straight, like probably a bit too quickly. I don't know for a fact, but I think the fact that I was maneuvering it, and it felt so, didn't feel so good, but you know what I mean? It felt so good internally to go, like, to be so in control of such a involuntary reflex, like, and being so in tune with it. Like I said, I think prior to that, when you're going through labor, before pushing, you're kind of just trying to get yourself into these zones, like to almost like not forget, but like kind of unswitch your, like turn your brain off, where when you're pushing, I never, like my brain was so on, like it was so focused, you know. And I think, and like I said, I never once was worried about myself or the baby, like obviously worried in the sense that I thought I was going to tear, but like not worried about anything sinister, which was amazing. And I'm really grateful for that. Yeah, like I said, I just wish it wasn't filmed, even though I would skip through a lot of it when I was being a bit silly.
No, it's wonderful to it's a great piece of advice there to, if you can get the second midwife to film it, to do that, or a student midwife or a doula or anybody else who's available to do that, because it does help women to integrate their birth, to see themselves in labor, because so much of what's happening is beyond your awareness at that time, because you're in such a different space yourself. Tell me, Danni, what do you think made the biggest difference to you getting the outcome that you did? When you look at your journey and your path, what were the things along the road that helped you to really click into that zone of being able to activate your full potential?
I think definitely my midwife and Drew. Like, I think if they weren't there, and if they weren't educated the way they were, and the way that, like, Drew obviously being educated in what he needs to do to be the best partner, because for all I know, like, I may have not gone to the toilet the whole time and my bladder may have been full and I may not have been able to push her out. That could have been like something that happened, and I was not aware of that. And my midwife being so in tune, like, she obviously just had such similar, not values, but like the same, like, she was just so, her way of working was so in tune with how I wanted my birth. And just Drew was there the whole time, knew what needed to be done, understood what my body was going through too, which he wouldn't have known if we didn't do the course together, which I'm so grateful for. And he just knew what I needed, what my body was going through. He never really panicked, except for that 1 second where I was going through transition, and he just was like,
he went into
I'm looking at a wild animal. Yeah, he was like, I probably was like, do with that animal, like, scaling the shower. And then my midwife just leaving us to do our thing, and and then it's like she knew exactly when she needed to say something, and she knew exactly what to say and when to say it. And when she did intervene, it was at the perfect time. And I think that's just comes down to who she is, and her education, and like the way, I guess, that all the midwives are that are from the continuity of care program. Like, she just came in at the right moment when I needed her, like when I was going through transition, and like when I was going to push, and I was pushing probably not the wrong way, but not the most efficient way. She came in and like quickly said something to me, brought me back like into my head, and helped me get through it. So I think that's really important. And I think I'm a bit of a panicker by nature, just in life. Like, I'm a worrywart, and I think me being educated on what my body was doing, and like knowing that, yes, this is an uncomfortable feeling, yes, this can be scary, yes, this is all brand new, but knowing what my body was doing and why it was doing it, and that like it's okay. And just riding the wave and trusting my body. And like, I don't think I ever did a particular breathing exercise during labor, but I was very in tune with, like you said, riding the wave and like not tensing up. And I think I was just intuitively breathing a certain way, because I was so focused on like the wave and making sure that I wanted everything to open up in the right way. And there was we put on a few tracks, like I had a playlist, and it was music, but also in with the music, it was like on shuffle, there'd be one of the like breathing exercises. And even though maybe I wasn't sitting there doing it perfectly, just like listening to it and like, every so often tuning into it was really helpful. I remember there was one moment during the labor where I like took note of what was going on the what was coming through the speaker. And I remember it was during one of the like breath work exercises, and I remember thinking, oh, like I wish I just had the playlist of just that, because apparently my midwife and Drew said at one point, I don't remember saying this, Ed Sheeran was playing, and I got really angry that I felt like he was yelling at me. I was like, Ed's yelling, it's too much screaming. Like, I don't think I wanted the music. I think I just wanted like the Zen breathing, like positive affirmations. Wow. So yeah, I think like not just saying this because this is your podcast, I honestly think the education that I got from this podcast, from this course, and also all the other like birth stories I was hearing around me, was like helped so much. Even the birth stories that I guess I heard that weren't always super positive, I think that just gave me the idea of things that, like, preparing for like what could happen, and like finding out how people manage those, and that, like, even though it may, like, things may happen that may not be the most idealistic way of it happening, you know, like you can still be a positive outcome, which I think was really important. But we were just lucky that it all kind of was really smooth sailing. But after I gave birth and it was all over, I looked at Drew and I was like, I don't know if I could do that again. Like, I'm so proud of myself that I did it. And like, that was the best thing I've ever done. And like, I'm just so grateful for it. I just remember thinking, oh my God, but it's funny. It's so true what they say, like whatever hormones are in your body postpartum, it makes you slowly forget. Because now like all I think about when I'm like thinking about my birth is how cool it was and like how awesome I am. But I think straight after you're just like, never again.
I think you're still high from those hormones, Danni, just quietly. It's 11 months on now.
I've loved talking about my birth story. Like, I love it. It's so exciting.
Beautiful. It's beautiful to watch. And Danni's story is a great example of when we can create the right space around women, get them well prepared, get their partners well prepared, and then allow them to sort of walk on that path, finding whatever comfort, whatever resources they need, TENS machine, the shower, the bath, the movement, all the different things that you worked with, the music, the practices that you did. These are all things that can support us to birth under all circumstances. And Danni's birth was a very straightforward birth, which is beautiful. It's when birth works, and it gives us great faith in the power of birth. She didn't need that extra help, but you know, the power of the preparation and the support that you had on the day is just, we can't really negate any of the preparation and the work that you did to get to that point to be able to go through that. So thank you, Danni, so much for sharing your beautiful story and the story of the arrival of Savannah. And thank you for listening. We'll have some more goodness for you next week. Take care. Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au? Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.